Hi there, my name's Andy and I've been asked to make a speech to you today based on the sort of consecutive speeches that you will very likely come across in a freelance test. And I've pitched this one to be slightly longer than perhaps your average speech, around 6, maybe even slightly more minutes, because that's the sort of length you will come up against possibly in a freelance test. So the topic I've chosen for our speech today chimes in with the fact that today is International Women's Day, so I've chosen to speak about women serving in the army. So with that, maybe we could just get started. I'll even try and time myself to make this as realistic as possible. This always takes a little while in a real life situation as well, so don't worry. There we go. Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, one of the most well-known figures from British history is a woman. She went by the name of Boudica, and she was a warrior. She lived some 2,000 years ago, and she led an uprising against the then occupying Roman forces in the British Isles. And she was a ferocious warrior. She would think nothing of chopping people's heads off, or of taking whatever they used in those days as a sword and sticking it into the belly of the nearest Roman soldier. And so it's surprising, given Boudica's almost iconic status in Britain, it's surprising that the British government, 2,000 years later, has taken a decision which will prevent women from fighting in the front line of the army if that's going to involve hand-to-hand combat. This decision has been taken after a government review, which was 4 years in the making. Now, I've been quite careful in my choice of words. I said that women are, on the basis of this review, prevented from serving in the front line in hand-to-hand combat situations. And that's because the front line can cover many different things. Women can serve, for example, in the artillery or as fighter pilots. Both of these things are considered to be front-line positions. But women will not be allowed to serve in the front line if that means them coming face to face with the enemy and having to engage in physical hand-to-hand combat with the enemy. As a result of this decision, some 30% of all the jobs open in the army are unavailable to women. Women can't take up those posts. So why has the government taken this decision? There are a number of reasons. Firstly, the government argues that modern warfare is intensely physical and women simply don't have the strength that is required in order to do the job. To give you an example, you may have a situation in which a soldier is wounded. Your responsibility is to pick up that soldier, and we're talking big guys that can weigh 80 kilograms, even 90 kilograms. You have to pick him up and carry him back to safety behind your own lines. You also have to carry your equipment, 15 kilograms, and his equipment, another 15 kilograms. Now that's an awful lot of weight to have to carry around. And the government says that women simply don't have the strength, particularly the upper body strength, to be able to do that. Now, the second reason that the government doesn't want women in hand-to-hand combat situations has to do more with the nature of modern warfare. Modern warfare is largely mechanized, by which I mean it's fought using tanks and armoured cars. Now, your average tank crew, 6, 7 men, will have to spend a very long time in the confined, cramped, sweaty space that is the inside of a tank. And they may have to be there for 24, maybe even 36 hours at a stretch, during which time there's only one possibility for them to relieve themselves. There's an chemical toilet which is placed underneath the driver's seat. The argument goes that it's already rather embarrassing for a man to have to use this chemical toilet surrounded by his colleagues. It would be even more embarrassing for a woman to have to do so. And the third argument that the government gives has to do with the fact that allowing women to serve in hand-to-hand combat situations is basically an experiment. You don't know whether a woman is going to be able to hack it in such a situation until you actually try it out. But what happens if you have a woman in the front line and she finds herself faced with a 2-meter tall animal of a man running at her with his bayonet pointed directly at her belly? She suddenly decides, actually this isn't such a good idea and maybe I could change my mind. Well, of course she can't. And as a result of this uncertainty, perhaps, people, say the government, are likely to die. There's simply not worth putting people's lives at risk in order to prove that you have a pro-women, politically correct policy in place, say the government. So that's the policy of the British government. Now, other countries are somewhat more enlightened than we are. In Denmark and Norway, for example, women are allowed to serve in all positions of the army, including frontline, hand-to-hand combat positions. And that's perhaps understandable, given that these Scandinavian countries have a long-standing tradition of gender equality, of treating men and women absolutely equally. But we shouldn't get carried away, because the fact is that although women could serve in hand-to-hand combat situations, in fact, none do in any of these countries. The reason given by the military authorities in Norway and Denmark is quite simply that no woman has yet fulfilled the job conditions. Obviously, they haven't met Margaret Thatcher yet. And also, it's interesting to see that, in fact, this more enlightened, open policy doesn't encourage more women into the army. Women make up about 8% of the personnel in the Army and the Navy in the United Kingdom. In the United States, which has exactly the same policy as the United Kingdom, women make up as many as 16% of the armed forces. Compare that to the situation in Denmark and Norway. Women make up 5% of the army in Denmark and only 3% in Norway. So, what's my conclusion? Well, basically it's this. If you're a woman and you feel that it's your inalienable right as a woman to serve in the army in exactly the same way as a man might, then I suggest that there are two courses of action open to you. If you want to avail yourself of your right to go to the toilet surrounded by 6 or 7 battle-hardened and probably sex-starved men, or if you want to avail yourself of your right to have somebody charge at you with a bayonet screaming as they do so, then fine, go ahead and marry a Norwegian or a Dane. If, however, you think it might be a little bit more fun to fly a stealth bomber, well, in that case, perhaps you could consider marrying an American instead. Thank you very much for your attention.